just welcome everybody to this session on Agtech, delivering benefits to the continent. And my name is Eniola Harrison. I'm a communications consultant and co-founder of Africa Communications Week, and I'll be moderating this session with Michelle Adelman, who is a seasoned strategist, recognized business leader, and fierce advocate for mission-driven investing. So she is the founder of Aside. I'm going to give her room to introduce herself fully and tell us more about what she does. But I'm super pleased that we're having this conversation about Agtech in Africa, its rise, and really answering the question if Agtech is really delivering on everything it promises, right? Because there's so much in the news, there's so much hype around Agtech and how it is the future of agriculture across the continent. A continent where most people are, in fact, subsistence farmers. So, Michelle, welcome, thank you, and tell us more about yourself.
Well, great. I'm American, but I've been living and working in Africa since 2012, and I founded and run Excite, which is a boutique firm that's focused on building sustainable food and ag tech businesses, and we really build them from scratch, right? Focused around, spurring economic diversification, employment of youth and women to, ultimately make the continent more food secure. So, our model is really to take proven Western technologies and really apply them in a sensitive way into the African context. And recognizing all of the different social, political, infrastructure challenges needed, and really building world-class teams with local youth at the forefront. So we have 3 businesses that we've built and incubated, one of which I'll probably spend the most time talking about today. So we have a fresh produce business in Botswana called Go Fresh. And this has been operating since 2014, and it's the premier fresh produce brand now in the country. And we use, very high-tech hydroponic greenhouses to grow fresh produce in the desert, in a country where only 2% of the land is arable, 365 days a year. And so I also have 2 other businesses. So I always have about 3 going on. One that's kind of mature, and I'm effectively divesting to local shareholders. One that I'm building, and one that I'm incubating. So we also have a business called Infinite Foods, which is focused around plant-based food. So the whole idea that as a continent, historically, we had plant-based diets, but we are rapidly moving to being more meat-centric and dairy-centric in the way that we eat. And that's putting us on a collision course with the planet and with industrialized agriculture. And so while across the continent today, most of our agriculture is smallholder, it's generally regenerative. If we continue to consume meat and dairy at the rate that we are from animal sources, we're going to have to move to a very industrialized agricultural system like you see in the US and Europe. And that's got all sorts of issues associated with it. And then I have a third business that's in the early stages called Crossover Meats, where we're using blended proteins to try to provide more sustainable meat solutions for consumers. So, as much as I'm a big fan of plant-based food and the Beyond Burger and all these, amazing new plant-based foods, we recognize that we're not going to get everybody to move to plant-based. And so we need to find sustainable ways of delivering protein, and using chicken is actually one of the ways that you do that. And so we have blended proteins that allow you to blend, meat, chicken and pork, and chicken and beef, and chicken and lamb in a way that creates sustainable ground meat solutions. So that's what I'm up to. Not too much.
Not too much. Well, that's amazing. I mean, I think there's really lots to really go into across the different businesses. I'd like to talk, a little bit more and touch upon Go Fresh and how you're able to, grow food in the desert. And I, suspect, you will share more about hydroponics with us later. But the first question I would really like to ask, so speaking about Agtech in Africa, right? Is it, so you're on the ground, you are, very much aware of the realities. Is it delivering the benefits that it has promised? What are some of the biggest opportunities in Agtech right now across the continent?
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you mentioned, 60% of Africans are still smallholder farmers. So, the one of the biggest challenges is that ag tech hasn't been widely implemented. It really is being implemented in very small pockets. And look, ag tech is a very broad subject. I mean, ag tech can be as simple as, an app on one of these things that helps give you better view of weather, or alerts you to prices. Or it could be something as sophisticated as what we run in our greenhouse, where we literally have a computer system that's controlling mechanical equipment that mixes fertilizers and irrigates plants automatically, every hour on the hour from 7 a.m. until 5 p.m. and knows the difference between a tomato plant and a cucumber plant. So there's a wide range of tech, and so I think we need to be careful not to kind of lump all ag tech into one category, because this simple things like this, like I'm sitting in Botswana today. That's a totally different session, but I communicate with my team. We have dashboards, we do alerts. I mean, there's some very simple things that you can do on using lower tech. So it hasn't been widely implemented, but where it has been implemented, it certainly works, and it definitely makes a difference. I think that we can't underestimate how challenging it is, though. So, with GoFresh, for example, we use a computer system that effectively controls our greenhouse. So we have a controlled environment. It's a closed greenhouse, and the computer controls the environment inside, right? It turns fans on and off. It makes screens roll up and down. It exhausts humidity, and it controls irrigation. So it literally mixes, it tests pH and EC, it irrigates plants. It knows, like I said, it knows the difference between if it's watering a tomato plant or a cucumber plant, and can do something different. And that in the Botswana context has transformed how we grow produce. In the desert, in a country where only 2% of the land is arable, we're able to grow beautiful grade 1 produce all year round. And, the technology has really done a couple of key important things for us. One is, it increases the consistency of what we grow, right? So we're no longer dependent on somebody getting up in the morning and flipping a switch and starting an irrigation process and mixing chemicals, every day at 7 a.m., 365 days a year. That kicks on and happens automatically. It's allowed us to recruit young farmers, because effectively the technology is codifying knowledge, right, into systems that makes it much easier then to recruit young farmers, especially young people right out of university, and teach them how to farm. So it does deliver, a much better quality product. We grow more produce more efficiently and more effectively in the greenhouse than we do right next door to it when we grow outside in a protected tunnel that doesn't have computer controlled irrigation. So those are all of the good things. Okay. The challenges from a technology perspective is we cannot underestimate how challenging our African environment is. In terms of heat, bad water, right? We're not all operating our agricultural systems on municipal water, right? I mean, the water corrodes, in our case, it corrodes sensors, it corrodes pumps, it corrodes lines. And things that are supposed to have a 7-year useful life might only have a 3-year useful life. Power. That's a really interesting one, right? If you're going to run a computer system, you have to have power. And, I spent more money the first year that we launched the greenhouses, finally figuring out how many layers of voltage control and backup systems I had to put in place between the computer system and the power lines, right? Because the voltage would go up and the voltage would go down, right? Or the power would go out, it'd come back on, there'd be a storm. And, we were frying these very expensive computer cards on a regular basis, and it took us time to figure out, okay, these are all the things that we have to do to control the quality of the power that we're getting from the power lines. Internet connectivity, that's a fun one. Our computer system talks to the internet. It communicates to a centralized computer. It allows me to log into the greenhouse remotely. If you don't have internet in rural areas, or if you don't have stable internet, it becomes a problem. So these are all some of the challenges that we face. The heat is a problem. Things that aren't supposed to melt. And so I think we have to understand, and we have to make sure that the systems and the technology that we're putting in place are durable. And we have to adapt to make them durable. So it's not like, it's not durable, it won't work. No, you have to now create the surround system so that it actually can last. And the other last bit is access to spares. So, a lot of these systems and technology are coming from overseas, and, you have a sensor going down, it's got to come from Holland. You have to pay in euros. It has to be flown in. It has to get across the border. Hopefully it doesn't get stuck at customs with some customs officer who doesn't know what this thing is. And so all of these things are things that we have to think about when we're implementing technology in our African context.
Okay. I mean, I think we can all relate to infrastructure challenges.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's super important. I think that for Africa to advertise, we're going very much to address these infrastructure challenges.
Yeah.
So what will it take to see Agtech then contribute to food security in Africa in a meaningful way? We've talked about addressing infrastructure challenges. Where do you see the investments going? What are the trends for the future?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things that we never talk about is what is it that we're growing, right? So I mean, one of the things that we have to talk about in this dialogue is what is the food that we should be growing, and why are we growing it? Because so much of what our farmers do today is growing commodities, right, which are low value and don't really uplift them, and frankly, don't put food into the food system that is nourishing and healthy for society. So we could have a whole conversation on what do we need to think about differently about the types of food that we grow, right? And that'll lead us to different answers. But in terms of, barriers to ag tech adoption and what we need to do, I mean, the capital bit is obvious, and I'll talk a little bit more about the capital. But equally important is our education system. So if you can't do math and you can't read an instruction, you have a really hard time being a farmer, period, let alone being an ag tech enabled farmer. So we have to continue to focus on building our education system, putting value in education, and making sure that our young people have basic math, reading, and science skills to be able to, to use the technology.